All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. It's time for another episode of the SoundTraxx podcast. This is the Train Talk from Milepost 141, the SoundTraxx Soundbites podcast. But something just doesn't feel right here, and I'm not sure what it is. Let me see. I've got the locomotive, I've got cameras going, I've got my notes off to the side so I don't forget. Oh, I know what it is. There we go. Now it feels better. Now it feels like I'm back at the desk for the good old podcast. Now, for those of you listening on audio, I guess you'll just have to kind of find the video series version to see what I just did there. But anyway, we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. We're in the summer, and I know a lot of people tend to be traveling, especially in June, July. But we can't forget about our trains. We're still working on projects. We still have things to go. And I know that when the fall comes around, it's going to be time for op sessions and things like that to kick back up. And you want to make sure that you've got your models ready to go. So now's the time to upgrade the models that you wanted to put in some Tsunami 2s or even go to Blue Nami to give you and your operators just a little bit more options to be able to operate with. But we've got a lot of retailers around the country that are stocking the product, and we want to make sure. So if you are traveling, we want to make sure to support those guys. And so when you're traveling around, you want to make sure that you take a look at what which stores are in your area that you're heading to. So be sure to go to our website at SoundTraxx.com, and up at the top where you see company, you'll see a link to authorized retailers, and that's where you can find many of our retailers, not only around the country but all over the globe, that you could find. So if you're traveling abroad, you can find some of those good hobby shops that you would be able to pop into just to see what they have, because you never know, you may find the treasure you've been searching for years. And I know the retail stores will certainly appreciate the patronage. But with that, want to talk about another thing here is that we've been, over the past few months, or few weeks, been working on a lot of things, and I know it's been kind of busy here. The good news is we haven't really seen a big summer slowdown. A lot of people are still working on their models and stuff, so that's fantastic. But in that period of time, I've been handling most of the support. As you notice, Graham isn't here anymore. But we did hire a new fella to come in and help us out. Mr. Tom Austin will be here coming in, and so he's training this week as I'm recording this. And so hopefully he'll be on the phones and helping you guys with your questions here very soon. And that'll help out also because Tom comes to us as a lifelong modeler, and you'll get to meet him on the next episode as I bring him in. But we're really excited to have him on board. And not to spoil anything too much, but he may or may not model the same thing I do. So we'll see. We'll have to talk to him next week, our next episode. But we're really excited to have Tom along, and looking forward to having him for a while. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and step in, and we're going to talk about what I have here in front of me. And this is my latest model that I've been working on. And this kind of goes along with the video series that we've been doing on our YouTube channel called Rehab My Loco, where we can take some older models and add a little bit of detail to it, add a little bit of flair, and really make it pop and make it stand out like today's models. And so what I have here is an older Atlas GP38 that I put together. And I did this installation years ago with a Tsunami 2, and I decided, well, this would be a quick, easy upgrade to be able to put a Blue Nami in there. So I was able to take the P&P board out, put it in. But then I noticed when I first started doing these, the only thing I was adding was the class lights and the headlight and backup light. And with all the models that I've been doing now and adding more and more lights, I decided that really wasn't going to be sufficient anymore. So this became a much bigger project than I initially anticipated. Because of course I had to light the number boards. Now the good thing about the Atlas models is a lot of their models already come with those number boards lit. They have a clear plastic lens that comes from, in this case, most of the time, a single LED headlight that kind of shines the light out. And so the bulk of it going straight goes through the headlight, but then the how do I want to say this? The diffusion of light goes out to the number boards, and so they appear not quite as bright as the headlight. So it's a neat effect, but why can't we separate that and light them independently? And so when I first did this model, I cut that plastic piece up and just illuminated the headlight. I just put the LED in behind the headlight lens, left the number boards dark, and just basically installed them and didn't put a light behind them. And then I did install the class lights on the front. And it's interesting going back and seeing how I did this installation, because my methods, my techniques have changed quite a bit over the years as I gain more experience. And it was kind of fun looking back, but at the same time, I didn't really reinvent the wheel. I just kind of left some of the things the way they were. And basically what I did in this particular case was I added the light for the number boards, and the rear number boards as well. And then I added the ground lights or the truck lights, whatever you want to call them, onto the model. And I did this really easily. And if you've been watching our Rehab My Loco, you'll actually be able to see how to do some of the Atlas models, because in there I've got a clip, part 3, which will be coming very soon. I'm almost done filming. But part 3, I took another model I'm working on, which is a B23-7, and I've took those lenses and basically showed you how to cut them and drill them to add lights to it. And so with that, you'll be able to easily take that technique and apply it to many of your Atlas models, whether they're newer ones, older ones, or whatever the case is. So that way you can take advantage of the fact that their number boards light up, and you can light them independently, as I did here. So looking at camera 2 over here, so of course I have the headlight on in front of me here, but we've got our front class lights, and I know I have them dimmed a little bit, so it may not be as easy to see. I'm going to move this camera over just a little bit more, so hopefully it becomes a little cleaner. But we've got our front class lights on here, and then I turn on the front number boards, and with all the bright lights in front of me for the podcast here, it's kind of hard to see, but if I try to shield there as much as I can, and so when I turn them off and then turn them back on, you can kind of see how they're coming on. But one of the other things I did too was to illuminate the ground lights along with the front number boards. So you should be able to see that coming on the model just above the truck and under the cab. I wired those and mapped them. Actually, I didn't wire them. They're separate functions, but I mapped them to the same function, which in this particular case is function 26, so that way the front number boards and the ground lights or truck lights come on together, because typically the number board is as we've done in our Operations 101 series, the locomotive of record, and typically that's the one the engineer and is sitting in and running the train from. So that way I figure, well, the front number boards can do that. Now, if you're looking at the screen of my operating screen, you'll notice I have a whole bunch of blank functions, so certainly I can separate them and use them in different functions to have independent control, and I may still yet do that. And that's one of the benefits of using the SoundTraxx products, whether it's a Tsunami 2, Blue Nami, Econami, or whatever. If you decide to change your mind, you can just go back and change a CV. You don't have to fret, you don't have to worry about it, you're not going to break it. Nothing is set in stone. You can always go back and make changes. But for now, I've got the front number boards and the ground lights wired up, or not wired up, but turning on and off together. And so I did the same thing on the rear. And so when I move this other camera over to the back here, hopefully that'll come through okay. But when I turn on the rear class lights, you can see that those are on. And the rear number boards also are kind of dim, but you can see that they're illuminated. And then I have the rear headlight independently controlled with function 28. And that way I can have proper operation of the locomotive regardless of the direction of travel, so I have full control of the lights. In the real world, the railroads didn't turn off their headlight and turn on their backup light to do a switching move. That's very much a model railroad thing. And if you go back in our history, it looks at the technology, because when we started running more models, especially modern diesels, you look at the Athearn Blue Box, for example, Atlas with their RS3s and the early Alcos and their yellow boxes, even their GP38s and such, they had a small circuit board in there. But with some diodes, they allowed the light to be directional. And what they were doing was basically making sure the light was on in the direction of travel, since diesels can run bidirectionally. In other words, they can run in forward for a long distance in time, or they can run in reverse, whichever way they're needed. And that was one of their big advantages, was the fact that with steam engines, typically you're going to run one direction, because otherwise it would be just unusual or hard to see, especially as locomotives got bigger and bigger with more power, to see around a giant tender that's as tall as you are behind the cab. So with diesels, they became bidirectional. And so with a lot of those companies adding diodes onto their models to allow the lights to be directional, it just became so entrenched in our hobby that pretty much everybody looks at directional lighting. And all of our decoders, ours and other brand decoders, come with default directional lighting. And you can certainly use that if that's what you want. I've talked to many people over the years that say, well, that way I know which way my locomotive's going, because they're not always right on top of it when they're running. They may be down a little ways at one end of the yard or whatever the case is. And so from that perspective, I certainly understand. But it isn't something that you're stuck with. You can certainly open it up. And with our digital control, especially with our Blue Nami app, you can run the locomotives more prototypically, and it's just some settings in there to allow your locomotives to illuminate the lights independently. And if you've ever seen inside of a cab, they usually have this row of toggle switches, which are all the different lights on the locomotive, because the engineer is the one in charge of determining which lights are on. Now, one thing I did stop short of is I did not install any of the courtesy lights, and these are the lights that you would see on the steps or any of the walkways. I didn't do that on this Missouri Pacific thing right now, and I would say, probably knowing me, there's a greater than zero chance at some point I'll go back and do it. I just decided not to do it right this minute, so I left those off. But all of my locomotives are pretty much, I try to wire them the same way, and I also try to map them the same way, so that way when I grab any locomotive in my roster, they're going to operate the exact same way. And that way it gives me consistency, so that when either I come over, when I run trains at my house, or if I have friends coming over, they all know what functions do what, as they get used to the operations. And so therefore, it gives us that ability to have consistency. The other thing is that when you're consisting multiple locomotives, as you've seen me do here on the podcast, that way I know which functions do what, and I don't have to try to mix and match. Like this GP38 function 8 is my brake application, but these other U23Bs or whatever, function 9 is my brake, and now I got to go figure out how to conversion that. And then what happens is a lot of people tend to just, I don't need the brake. But it really is a really fun function to operate with. So the last thing I'll point out on this particular model is that this one, years ago when I did the first installation, is a 16 by 35 oval. So I didn't change over and use cube speakers like I normally would have. Again, the intention of this was to be quick and easy. So it does have some good sound to it. But I do also turn the volumes down quite a bit, because when I'm in my layout operating by myself, I don't want to sound like I'm standing next to the real thing, even though when I'm looking at this model, it tends to look like I'm, several hundred feet away. So that way, if I'm on the other side of the layout, I certainly don't want to hear the locomotives that are operating in the yard sound like I'm right next to them. So just to we'll fire this thing up and get it started. And the way I did this is I gave it a non-zero motor command, but you also have the RPM plus and minus. You can certainly use that function to start up the prime mover. But let's go ahead and we're going to turn on our front class lights and front number boards. And we'll move this camera around here again, just to kind of get a feel for it. So we'll blow our whistle signal. We've got our brake set, so we'll go ahead and give it a little bit of throttle. You can hear it load up, and then we can release the brakes, so that way it starts to move. And just like that, then we can set our brakes. and bring the locomotive to a stop. You can hear it squealing because I've got a lot of momentum built into it, and I've also got the brakes set in such a way that it'll stop this faster than if I just cut the throttle. But that way it gives me some realistic control operations. So now I can change directions, turn on our bell, and we'll give it some throttle, just kind of release. And you can see that it doesn't instantly take off and run at full speed. And we're going to turn off the bell because we're not selling ice cream. And, it gives a nice smooth operation. And now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the throttle just so you can see that I cut the throttle and it coasts to a stop. And then I can set my brakes when I'm set still if I want, change direction, and then throttle up. And you can hear it loading up as it's working against my throttle, or my brake, I mean. And then the DDE will kick back and bring it to a stop. So you can see how just adding a little bit of momentum and brake, and we'll bring your model to life. And we've done a lot of videos here, either on our YouTube channel, or we've done interviews and things like that with various clubs around the country, showing off just how to add a little bit of momentum to your model, so that way you can have a much more enjoyable experience. So now, having said all that, one of the things, I'm going to go ahead and shut this guy down. Now, as I mentioned, over the past several weeks, I've been doing a lot of the support, and I've talked to a lot of folks over there, and I don't want to throw anybody out under the bus, but one of the things I kind of notice when I have people have some strange behaviors, things like that, I do want to remind everybody that we do hand test our decoders before they leave here. Every one of them are hand tested, because then that way we can make sure that decoder works when we put it in the package. That's one of the ways we can also help troubleshoot your installation, because if you're having consistent issues with putting a decoder in, for example, we know there's got to be something going on over there, whether it's things we've talked about in the past, whether it's a type of flux that you're using. One of the ones that came up this week is a gentleman was not insulating his solder joints for his lights, and when he tucked it all in and put the shell on, well, suddenly he said the smoke was burned out, and then he opened it up and he couldn't figure out what he did, but he didn't insulate the solder joint where he soldered the white wires together. So he sent me pictures of his installation, and he's got a decoder buddy, a 21 pin, and he's got wires coming off of the decoder buddy, but then they're just soldered here. So when you push it in and you tuck it in there, we can't see where it's touching or where it's not. And those wires are hot, especially when he turns on the lights. And that's what he noted is he said, when I installed the lights and put the shell back on it, suddenly the decoder got hot and let out some smoke. When he sent me those pictures, I realized, wait a minute, you didn't insulate any of your light wires. And so what I want to remind you is that when you're working on these electronics, no, we're not talking about high amounts of current, but neatness is going to count. And so you want to make not only nice, neat, clean solder joints, but you also want to protect them and insulate them to make sure that when you do tuck them in the model, when you're done, they're not touching something they can't, because the decoders are designed to run power where it needs inside the decoder. But if you take a wire that's powered and touch it to something it's not supposed to, and that power routes through there and touches the decoder, yeah, it's very susceptible that you're going to burn something up. So the good news is that he was within the warranty period, so we told him we'd go ahead and take care of it and get it fixed up for him, so he's sending it in. But I want to point out, when you're doing your installations, take your time. We have some educational videos on our YouTube channel, and we do have a Webinar 7, which is a decoder installation overview. It kind of talks about a lot of the things that you're going to need to keep in mind when you're doing an installation. And then Webinar 8 is our soldering class. And I notice in our hobby that people will need to do soldering, and so they grab a soldering iron, or worse, a soldering gun, and they just start going to town. And they're very different things. And then they just go to the Home Depot and grab whatever supplies there, because nowadays Radio Shack isn't in everybody's community. And so therefore, they just start going to town and installing. And when you're dealing with delicate surface mount electronics, you can't just grab anything off the shelf and make it work. because a lot of these fluxes that you can get at, say, Home Depot have a really high acid content, and they will attack the decoder and cause random failures. And so again, if you have an instance where you're doing a decoder installation and you've done 4 on this one model, and all 4 of them have failed, but they're different failures. One's the audio amp, one's the lighting output, one's this. Chances are you probably have a flux that's not designed for work on electronics, or I should say surface mount electronics. Because I was noticing there was one I was talking to, he had a flux that was for DIY electronics. And DIY electronics are wire to wire, which means, typically the resistors that we're going to use when we're adding our LEDs, or if we're, go back to the old days where we would build these directional lighting circuits, for example, with the diodes and the bridge rectifiers and stuff. And those are what are considered DIY electronics. And so that's very different than surface mount. Surface mount tends to be a lot more sensitive, especially to high acid content in the flux. So again, you want to make sure that you have the proper stuff. The stuff I use at home is made by a company called ChipQuick, and the part number is SMD291NL. You can find that on Amazon. You can find it at DigiKey. You can find it at various places, and it comes in a syringe, so that way you can be very controlled on how much solder or how much flux you're applying to the joint, and the flux will make everything work so much better and make your installation successful. So ultimately, that's our goal. We want to make sure that you're enjoying your product, you're having a successful installation. So if you do encounter any of those troubles and things like that, please let us know. And if you're interested and you want to see how our decoders are made, be sure to check out on our YouTube channel where you can do a SoundTraxx tour. Now, it's about a 2-minute and 30-second, I believe, video, so it's very brief, but it kind of gives you an overview. So if you search SoundTraxx tour on YouTube, it'll pull up. I believe it says Manufacturing Day 2021, and that'll give you a quick, brief overview, and you'll get to see each station as we go to show you how the decoders are made here in our facility in Durango, Colorado. So, last thing leading into our YouTube channel, I do want to reference a few videos that are very popular. For example, the Rehab My Loco series. We dropped episode 2 not too long ago, so you want to check that out. It'll show you how to add a lot of details to help make your model pop, just like the modern day models that may be hung up in customs or maybe in overseas as they're waiting for the tariffs to be resolved and all this stuff. So this way you can take a little bit of effort. Plus, makes your model unique, because now you've put the effort in and it looks fantastic, and it really doesn't take that much effort to do. So be sure to check that video series out. Also, we've got our Operations 101. So when it comes to things like number boards, class light displays, things like that, we've done some videos in the past, and we're about to, I got to go in and film a new one coming up here in the next couple of weeks that will be Operations 101 to help you operate your trains just a little bit better every time. And but there's always a ton of videos. We've been posting videos on there for probably, I want to say, about 7 years, maybe 8 years, every week. So there's a lot of videos on there. So chances are, if you want to see a SoundTraxx feature in operation, just go ahead and search SoundTraxx and that topic. So for example, how many of you guys out there, let me know in the comments, how many of you guys out there knew about the SoundTraxx deadband feature in the Tsunami 2s and Blue Namis? Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to see what you say. But that's a feature that not many people know. And so you'll have to search that video to find out exactly how it works, because I don't want to spoil it for you. And the lengths that will go to help you enjoy your models running just a little bit more, because chances are, if there's a way you want your model to run, you can use the adjustments in the SoundTraxx decoders to make them run the way you want to. And that's what our goal is we want you to enjoy your hobby, we want you to enjoy our products, and continue buying SoundTraxx. So with that, that's everything I've got planned for this particular episode. I know it's fairly short. I'm shooting this on a Thursday, and mentioning the SoundTraxx tour, I've actually got a tour showing up here at any moment now, so I got to sign off. But if you do happen to visit the area, just give us a shout and let us know, and we'll try to accommodate you for a tour around our factory, because we're proud of what we do. And so if anybody ever does come out to ride that world-famous Durango and Silverton Railroad, come see SoundTraxx while you're here. Well, anyway, that's everything I've got planned for you guys this week. So thanks for watching. I appreciate you tuning in. And if you have any thoughts of topics you want to hear me discuss or comment on, let us know in the comments below, and we'll try to see if we can get that on a podcast coming up soon. But next time you'll get to meet Tom as he comes in and learns, and he's really excited to be here. I can tell you that firsthand. So we're real excited to have him. So we're looking forward to that. So be sure to tune in. And if you're not subscribed to our channels, whether you're watching this or listening to this on Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever you can get your podcast, be sure to subscribe to that. It helps us out and lets us know to keep doing this because you guys find it interesting and not just me talking to a microphone. So with that, I am going to let you go. So guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next episode of Train Talk from Milepost 141. This is the SoundTraxx Soundbites podcast. So thanks. We'll see you next time.